ESPN Eagles insider. That is John McMullen. And producer Hunter said to him, "You pumped? You souped? You excited?" And John, your response was?
Yeah, I feel like, Hunter said it was like Christmas Day. Well, I'm like the dad who's got to put together the big toy on Christmas Eve. It's not quite the same.
Right. But look at the joy on the, what's it going to be, 67,000 faces more than likely?
There was tremendous joy. I tend to forget about that. It's nice to be reminded that some people get really excited. I get it. But it's a little bit different for certain people.
Including beat writers, that this is now. So what season is this for you? How many seasons of covering Eagles football?
Oh, yeah, I hate when people ask me this. Rob Motti asked me this the other day, and I had to think about it and do the math.
Well, you should be prepared now, then.
I think it's 25 covering the NFL. That's not good.
Okay.
That's not good, Pete.
25?
That's not good.
There's something significant. I don't know what I'm supposed to get you. What's the 25th?
That's
is that
silver anniversary.
Silver. So, okay.
I'm rounding. I think it's actually 24, so you don't have to get me anything.
Oh, all right. Well, next year I'll get you something then.
Yeah. If I make it. Doubtful. It's always doubtful.
One of the lines
day to day.
One of the lines that I use when I walk into school every morning, half awake, and somebody says, "Good morning, how you doing?" or "How's things?" I say, "Nowhere I'd rather be." And then I just grin at them with that look. So listen, nowhere you'd rather be, though, than in the press box in the locker room tomorrow to provide our coverage for us, which we're so thankful for. Tell us a little bit, too, about, this kind of popped up yesterday, this whole Nigel Bradham thing, and it was sort of like, hey, is he going to play? What happened? And sort of an interesting story from week 4. And I think you asked about it in the press conference, too, to try and get to the bottom of it.
Yeah, a very strange situation. Nigel claims he was ill. I take him at his word. But he's also a veteran player in the NFL. Just turned 30, as a matter of fact, on Wednesday. He's been around for a while. So he understands you can't just not show up and not inform the right people. And that's essentially what happened for the final preseason game against the Jets. And look, no veteran was playing in that game. I'm sure no veteran wanted to make that trip up the turnpike. I know I didn't want to make the trip up the turnpike. So, you can't use that. And from the Eagles' perspective, look, I think there's something else going on from Nigel's perspective. And I mentioned it on the Sports Bash with Mike yesterday. It could be a number of things. The most obvious with any NFL player is always contract. But you just mentioned Dorian. And remember, at one point, that was bearing down on Florida. People thought it was going to hit Florida pretty significantly. And Nigel's a South Florida guy, so maybe he was just concerned about his family, things like that. But the Eagles checked flights to South Florida, flights to Miami, when Nigel did the no-call, no-show. So that, to me, if you immediately jump to that, well, that tells me you don't think it's just a run-of-the-mill, he forgot. You're concerned that he went back to Florida for a reason, and that's what we're trying to get to the bottom of. And, hey, all you can do is ask the questions, and Nigel says it was as simple as he was feeling that poorly, that he wasn't worried about his phone or anything, and the Eagles say it's behind them. There was certainly a penalty, a fine, and we'll see. I said Doug might do that old college thing when college coaches suspend players. Maybe they bench them for a series or a quarter. I could see him doing that, but other than that, it's just going to be the fine. And Doug did confirm he's going to play against the Redskins, so there's no one-game suspension or anything of that nature.
All right, definitely an interesting topic on a Friday. And then, of course, when I did used to go up to Eagles practice to shoot for TV 40, you didn't get much in the first 10 minutes anyway, but boy, you were really challenged when those 10 minutes came in the bubble. That bubble hasn't gotten any bigger from the year they opened the complex, and whether it's 53 or 100, it's tight quarters no matter what.
No, and it's a lot that, one of the good things of the summer from the Eagles' perspective is there was tremendous weather. They were not forced into the bubble once during training camp, which is good because you have 90 players. Mm-hmm. So you can imagine, as you just said, it's difficult enough with 53, really 63 with the practice squad, but nonetheless, you can imagine with 90 and plus the media contingency that follows this team, which is basically another 50 or 60. So, yeah, that gets very, very close quarters. And, one of the things I do think the Eagles have to figure out in the years to come, and you see it in Dallas and particularly Minnesota, they're the last two teams to build these new facilities, and they are just gorgeous. Right. I mean, they are huge. And I was talking to Craig James, who just signed here on the practice squad, was with the Vikings last year. They have 6 different practice fields. There's a hotel built on the campus. There's a high school football stadium that they run games in. The Star in Dallas has that has a mini arena. They've had major boxing events there.
Wow.
And so my point is they have all this room, and for preparation standards, it hasn't hurt the Eagles so far. I mean, they've been tremendously successful, and they're still a destination for many players. But when you look at that bubble and you do see bad weather, you can't prepare like you should be able to prepare.
Right, one field. It looks like, I'm sure when who's the president of the team right now that does all that came in and did all the facelift, like the tunnel that leads from the locker room to the field at Lincoln Financial Field and stuff. It looks like they've done some cosmetic upgrades on the bubble, but the bottom line is one field is one field.
Yeah, exactly. Don Smolenski.
That's who I'm thinking of. Yeah.
I mean, Carolina's the latest. I mean, David Tepper bought that team. They didn't even have an indoor practice facility, and now he's making plans to build this a new glorious practice facility. So at some point, there's going to have to be a new facility or an expansion and that Navy Yard parking lot,
yep.
which Pete, is huge, but it's owned by the city, so there's a lot of complications with the neighbors in South Philadelphia as well. So I don't know what happens, but yeah, they need more room.
Oh, that's interesting because I drove past that after a Phillies game this summer, and the person that I was showing was, I explained the footprint of the old Naval Hospital, but until you pointed that out, I actually thought the Eagles owned that parking lot, but that's the city that owns it all the way to the traffic light then, huh?
Yeah, and there's there were deals made back in the day with the some kind of South Philadelphia neighborhood kind of panel, whatever. I'm not sure the actual name of it, but there are also legal complications from that perspective as well. So there's a lot of hurdles. And, anytime anybody's ever been around Philadelphia, who's read about doing business with the city of Philadelphia, it's not easy.
Well, and not for nothing, just the optics too. I mean, the fact I went to Temple, and not to throw my own alma mater under the bus, but obviously as Temple's footprint expanded, the folks that actually had homes in North Philadelphia were a little bit perturbed that Temple just kept getting bigger and infringing on blocks, and that's a very real urban thing.
Yeah, no question. And I can see at a point, it's not even been broached, but I could see a long ways down the line where they might say, hey, let's go find a place in the suburbs with plenty of room and move the facility there. Not saying it's going to happen, but again, if it becomes a competitive disadvantage because there's very few teams. I brought up Dallas, Minnesota, Carolina is going in that direction. There's very few teams with those glorious, glorious practice facilities, but if more and more start to get them, it will become a competitive disadvantage.
And what year was that built, the NovaCare Complex? What year did it open?
Boy, I don't know. I'd have to check. I wasn't here at the time they moved to the NovaCare Complex, so it doesn't. I would have to check into that. But it's amazing how quickly you see it with stadiums. It's amazing how quickly stadiums get built and they look awesome and they feel awesome, and then 5 to 10 years later, there's bigger, more amenable stadiums. $3 billion they're spending on the one in Los Angeles. They become outdated just as quickly. So it's sort of like buying an electronic. The minute you buy it, it's depreciating rapidly.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, the Wells Fargo Center is a good example, by the way, of course, of a building that then they face that decision of, are we going to knock it down and build something new, or are we going to try to renovate what we existing and what we have? I mean, it's interesting. You're right. You wouldn't think that, I'm sure the actual building itself, you've been in there, the locker rooms, the offices, the facilities, that part for the Eagles is not outdated. But the fact that they only have, now, what do they have, 2 grass fields or 3 grass fields? And then 1 turf field, right?
Yeah, really 3.5. They have sort of that extra offensive line field, but it's really just 3. How they can set it up, actual football fields, and then even the locker in the off season when there is 90 guys, the locker room it's really cramped. So, I bring up James again. Andrew Sendejo as well. They have a fireplace in the Vikings locker room.
Wow.
And it's so you should go online and check it out and check out that facility they built. And Dallas is arguably, if people saw All or Nothing on Amazon a couple years ago, they showed that facility. You can get a really, really good look at that facility and check out the locker room there. It's a big difference.
Well, it's easy to figure out the math. The Eagles win their 2nd Super Bowl at the end of this season. They raise ticket prices, and then Jeffrey Lurie uses some of that money to find himself some new property and build a new bubble or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of what you have to do to stay competitive, and I mean, people can make arguments about they make enough money to do this already, but we know how businesses are run. The goal is to make as big a profit as you can, so it's not going to be altruistic, let's put it that way. I mean, yeah, they're going to raise prices if they need to build something. There's no question about that.
We're talking with John McMullen, our 97.3 ESPN Eagles insider. I didn't mean to go this far down the rabbit hole on the bubble, but, I find it interesting, so I enjoy the conversation, John. I hope my listeners do as well. At JF McMullen is his Twitter handle. It's got a picture up from yesterday, Bubble Day for Fly, Eagles Fly, right? So if you want to see what that bubble looks like, and we definitely should talk about some of the injuries, and one of the things I teased was what Mike Gill was talking about yesterday is a significant person not on the injury list, so expected to play, and that's Brandon Brooks.
Yeah, pretty amazing. I mean, he tore his Achilles against New Orleans in the playoffs, so yeah, he's not even questionable for Week 1, and this has been his goal. Obviously, he has not done anything in the preseason from a game standpoint, from even a practice standpoint. But he's always had Week 1 in mind. He's always said that he feels good. He feels ready to go. I just look at it from the perspective of Brandon's a 350-pound guy, and it's an Achilles injury. And that's quick. It's generally a 9-month injury. And as I said, we're less than 8 months off this for a guy of that stature. And I think another part of it for this particular team is, if you go all the way back to when Jason Peters tore his Achilles, he tore it again when he was trying to rehab.
Right.
And obviously Jason is a similar size, and there is more wear and tear on the legs when you're that size. I mean, that's just common sense. So I'm a little surprised that the Eagles are going to put him back on the field, but from their perspective, they're going to lean on the fact that the doctors have cleared him, and if you're cleared, you're cleared. And I get that part of it as well. If the doctor says you're ready to go, well, then you're ready to go.
Definitely something we'll be watching. Derek Barnett and his shoulder, what's your take on his situation and his health?
Well, I think in Derek's case, they've been more cautious as far as limiting his workload in the preseason. I don't think there was much of a question that he was ultimately going to be put out there for week one. I think the question's there, and not only with him, but certain other players who haven't played in the preseason. It's more of that preparation versus getting to week one as healthy as possible. So you saw the sloppiness on Thursday night in that game. I think you're going to see sloppiness all over the NFL because so many of these guys have practiced so little, and Derek's in that category. Forget about the games. I'm talking about practice. They haven't practiced that much. So, I mean, to expect them to all of a sudden wake up, roll out there week one and be the same people, I don't think that's going to happen.
Yeah, there was some concern about Alshon Jeffrey. There's concern about Deshaun Jackson. Both of the guys look like they're going to play, and Doug seems to have that not that big a deal attitude about it.
Yeah, I think that not big a deal attitude has the realization that they do look at the opponent. They think they're a lot better than the opponent, and they think that there is going to be sloppiness, but that sloppiness is going to be on both sides. So from there, you just take over that team with the more talent, and really significantly more talent wins the game. So I think that's why the Eagles are so confident, and they are very confident heading into this game. But, yeah, I mean, I also told Mike yesterday, I think you're going to see some fans that are pretty upset even after a win, because I do think it's going to be ugly at times. And
right.
People are not going to understand that it happens all over the league, and if you're watching Thursday night, you saw it up close.
I was watching Thursday night. I want to know if you've got one of those old-timey reporter hats like the Chris Collinsworth and Al Michaels wore. You know, do you have one of those with the little press cards sticking out?
You know that, Pete. You know that. I broke out my Bruce Arians hat for Brandon Graham.
Right, he liked
yesterday because it's week one.
Right.
So we're both ready to go. For I got a new job in Tampa, so I got to do double duty.
That's so funny. I love that they call you that. And especially BG, you know, since he had his running joke with Derek Gunn every time he'd come off the field and holler at him like, you doubted us, you didn't trust us. That's exactly the kind of guy that each week when he sees you, he'd be like, what does he say, hey, Coach, or hey, Bruce?
He says, hey, Bruce. He calls me Bruce every day.
Right.
Yeah, he's got a tremendous personality. I mean, he's the kind of guy, I don't know anybody who doesn't like Brandon Graham. He's one of those guys. He's sort of like a Pete Thompson.
There you go. How can you not like Brandon Graham? How can you not like the PT? How can you not like John McMullen?